The bullet grazed so close to her temple that Amelia could feel the heat of it as she dove behind the overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs like a war drum. Coolidge, Arizona in the summer of 1883 was no place for a woman alone. But here she was, caught in the crossfire of a bank robbery gone wrong, dust coating her throat as men shouted and guns blazed across Main Street. She pressed herself against the splintered wood, eyes squeezed shut, praying to a God she had stopped believing in 3 years ago when her husband's fists had taught her that devils walked among men. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving only the ringing in her ears and the frantic breathing of someone nearby. Amelia opened her eyes to find a cowboy crouched beside her, his weathered hat pulled low, a revolver still smoking in his right hand. He was older than her by perhaps 5 years, putting him somewhere near 30, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes the color of creek water after a storm. Those eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her shrink back instinctively. "You hit." His voice was rough, concerned, and when he reached up to push his hat back to see her better, Amelia flinched so violently she cracked her head against the wagon wheel. The cowboy froze, his hands suspended in midair, and something shifted in his expression. Understanding dawned there, followed by something that looked like sorrow. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his hand until it rested on his knee, his movements as careful as if he were approaching a spooked horse. "I will never hit you," he said quietly, each word carrying the weight of a vow. "My name is Harrison Everett, and I swear on my mother's grave, I will never raise a hand to you in anger." Amelia stared at him, this stranger who had somehow seen her deepest shame written across her reflexive fear, and felt something crack open in her chest. Tears she had been holding back for months suddenly spilled down her dusty cheeks, leaving clean tracks through the grime. She could not speak, could barely breathe, but Harrison did not press her. He simply sat there beside her in the dirt, while the sheriff and his deputies rounded up the would-be bank robbers, his presence solid and unexpectedly safe. When the street finally cleared and the curious townspeople began emerging from their hiding places, Harrison stood and offered her his hand palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. Amelia looked at that calloused palm for a long moment before placing her trembling fingers in his. His grip was gentle, steady, as he helped her to her feet. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked, dusting off his denim trousers with his free hand before releasing hers. "Someone I can take you to." Amelia shook her head. She had been staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street, working as a seamstress to pay for her room and meals, ever since she had fled her marriage in Santa Fe 6 months ago. Her husband, a merchant with a respectable reputation and a private cruelty, had nearly killed her the last time. She still carried the scar along her ribs where his boot had cracked bone. "The boarding house," she managed, her voice hoarse from dust and emotion. "Mrs. Campbell's place." Harrison nodded, adjusting his gun belt. "I know it. Let me walk you there. Streets are not safe after something like this." They walked in silence through the dusty roads of Coolidge, past the adobe buildings baking in the relentless Arizona sun. The town was small, barely 300 souls, situated near the Gila River where farmers tried to coax crops from the stubborn earth. Amelia had chosen it precisely because it was small, remote, a place where a woman running from her past might disappear into the anonymity of hard work and quiet living. Harrison matched his stride to hers, never crowding her space, always maintaining a respectful distance. Other cowboys tipped their hats as they passed, calling out greetings to Harrison that marked him as a known and respected figure in town. She learned from their scattered comments that he worked at the Triple Bar Ranch just outside town, that he was considered the best horsebreaker in 3 counties, that he was a man of few words but honest dealings. At the boarding house steps, Harrison paused and looked at her directly. "Miss, I do not know your story and you do not have to tell me, but I want you to know something. What happened back there when you flinched, that was not right. Whatever made you learn that fear, that was not right. And I meant what I said. I will never be that kind of man to you or anyone." Amelia's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" A ghost of a smile touched his weathered face. "Because I have seen that look before. My sister, before my brother-in-law, met with an unfortunate accident involving a spooked horse and a canyon edge. She lived with that fear for 2 years before she found the courage to leave. I was too young then to understand, too powerless to help, but I am not young anymore, and I am not powerless." The implication in his words sent a chill through her despite the heat. "Did you? The sheriff ruled it an accident," Harrison said evenly, cutting off her question. "And it was. Man should have been more careful around horses when he had been drinking, especially horses that knew what he had done to their owner's sister." Amelia understood what he was not saying, what could never be proven but was nonetheless true. This man before her had made certain his sister was free, had taken justice into his own capable hands when the law would not. It should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something unfamiliar and precious flutter to life in her chest. "Hope, thank you," she whispered. "For today, for what you said." "No need for thanks," Harrison replied, touching the brim of his hat. "But if you ever need anything, anything at all, you can find me at the Triple Bar, or here in town most Saturday evenings. I mean that, miss." "Amelia," she said impulsively. "Amelia Owens." His smile deepened, reaching his eyes. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Amelia Owens. Though I wish it had been under better circumstances." Over the following weeks, Amelia found herself thinking about Harrison Everett more than was probably wise. She threw herself into her sewing work, taking and mending and alterations from the ranch wives and town ladies who appreciated her fine, even stitches. Mrs. Campbell, a widow with a kind heart and sharp eyes, noticed her distraction but said nothing, only squeezed her shoulder sometimes in passing, a gesture of wordless understanding. It was nearly 3 weeks later when Harrison appeared at the boarding house again, this time in the early evening when the worst heat of the day had broken. Mrs. Campbell called Amelia down from her room, a knowing smile playing at her lips. Amelia found Harrison waiting in the small parlor, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable among the lace doilies and flower-painted china. "Miss Owens," he greeted her, standing as she entered. "I hope I am not intruding. I wanted to check that you were well after the incident." Amelia's heart did a foolish skip. "I am well, Mr. Everett. Thank you for inquiring." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, the silence stretching. Finally, Harrison cleared his throat. "There is a church social on Saturday evening, just music and food, families mostly. I wondered if you might like to attend, with me, if you are comfortable with that." The invitation was so carefully worded, so conscious of her potential fears, that Amelia felt her defenses crumble a little more. She should say no. She should protect herself, keep her distance, avoid any entanglement that might lead her husband to her location. But Harrison's gray-green eyes held such honest hope that she found herself nodding. "I would like that," she said softly. "What time?" Relief flooded his features. "I will call for you at 6, if that suits." Saturday arrived with agonizing slowness. Amelia spent the morning finishing a dress order for the banker's wife, then allowed Mrs. Campbell to help her arrange her dark auburn hair in a style more becoming than the severe bun she usually wore. She had only one good dress, a simple blue cotton with white collar and cuffs, but it was clean and pressed and made her eyes look more gray than their usual uncertain hazel. Harrison arrived precisely at 6, cleaned up and wearing a pressed shirt under his vest, his boots polished to a shine. He offered his arm with that same careful courtesy, and Amelia took it, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric. The church social was held in the shade of ancient cottonwood trees behind the small adobe church, lanterns strung between branches as evening approached. Long tables groaned under the weight of contributed dishes, fried chicken and beans and cornbread and pies of every description. A trio of musicians played fiddle and guitar while children chased each other, shrieking between the adults. Harrison introduced Amelia to what seemed like half the town. She met the ranch owner and his wife, cowboys and farmers, the schoolteacher and the doctor's family. Everyone was friendly, welcoming, and no one asked intrusive questions about where she had come from or why she was in Coolidge. It was the first time in longer than she could remember that Amelia felt like she might actually belong somewhere. They filled plates and found a spot slightly apart from the main crowd, sitting on a blanket Harrison retrieved from his saddle. As they ate, they talked, really talked, in a way Amelia had not done with anyone in years. Harrison told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 17, about working his way across Arizona and New Mexico, learning horses and cattle, and the harsh lessons of desert survival. "I came to Coolidge 5 years ago," he said, gazing out at the darkening landscape. "Liked the quiet of it, the honesty. People here are not putting on airs. They work hard, treat each other fair, and do not ask more of a man than he can give." "It does seem like a good place," Amelia agreed, picking at her cornbread. "Better than where I came from." Harrison glanced at her, his expression carefully neutral. "Santa Fe," she startled, her stomach dropping. "How did your accent," he said gently, "the way you say certain words." "My sister lived there for a time, and I saw a notice, couple months back, about a merchant looking for his missing wife, offering a reward for information." Terror flooded through Amelia. She started to stand to run, but Harrison's hand came to rest lightly on her wrist. Not gripping, not restraining, just touching, grounding. "Wait," he said quietly. "Please. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you because I want you to know that I saw that notice and I threw it in the fire. And when that same merchant sent a man to Coolidge asking questions, Sheriff Morrison sent him packing with a warning not to come back. We look after our own here, Amelia. And you are one of ours now if you want to be." Amelia sank back down, her hands shaking. "Did the sheriff know about me?" "I told him enough. That you were running from a bad situation, that you deserved a chance at safety and peace. Tom Morrison is a good man. He has 3 daughters. He understands some things better than most." Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes. "My husband will not stop looking. He considers me his property. When I left, I took nothing but the clothes on my back and the money I had saved secretly over 2 years. He will be furious about the money, about me daring to leave, about the shame of it, what people might think." Harrison's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble. "Then he is a fool. And if he comes here, he will find that Arizona territory has its own ways of dealing with men who mistreat women, legal ways and otherwise." The quiet menace in his voice should have alarmed her, but instead Amelia felt protected, cherished even though they had known each other such a short time. It was a feeling as foreign as it was precious. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, searching his face. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the dancers now swirling to a lively reel. When he spoke, his voice was low and honest. "Because from the moment I saw you behind that wagon, terrified but alive, something in me recognized something in you." Like calls to like, I suppose. We have both been touched by cruelty, shaped by it in ways we cannot undo, but that does not mean we have to let it define us forever. He turned to look at her then, and the naked emotion in his gaze stole her breath. And if I am being fully honest, Amelia, it is because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since that day. Because when I close my eyes at night I see your face, your courage. Because I would very much like the chance to know you better, if you will allow it. Amelia's heart hammered in her chest. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from the possibility of pain. But a larger part, the part that had found the strength to escape her marriage and build a new life, wanted to be brave enough to reach for this unexpected gift. I would like that too, she whispered. But I am afraid of trusting again, of being hurt, of being found. I know, Harrison said simply. And I will not rush you. We can take this as slow as you need. I just want the chance to prove to you that not all men are like the one you married. That some of us know how to treat a woman with the respect and care she deserves. They stayed at the social until the lanterns burned low and families began packing up their baskets and rounding up sleepy children. Harrison walked Amelia back to the boarding house, their pace leisurely in the cooling night air. At her door, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a feather-light kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth cascading through her whole body. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "For trusting me enough to come." "Thank you for asking," Amelia replied, her hand tingling where his lips had touched. "And for what you told me, about the notice. It means more than you know." "Sleep well, Amelia Owens," Harrison said, releasing her hand with obvious reluctance. "I hope I might call on you again. I would like that very much." As summer deepened into the fierce heat of July and August, Harrison became a regular presence in Amelia's life. He called on her twice a week, taking her on walks along the river at sunset when the temperature finally became bearable, or bringing her small gifts, wildflowers from the range or a ribbon from the general store that matched her eyes. They talked about everything and nothing, building a foundation of friendship beneath the growing attraction that hummed between them. Harrison was unfailingly patient, conscious of her boundaries in ways that made Amelia want to weep with gratitude. He never touched her without permission, never crowded her space, never raised his voice even in jest. When they walked, he offered his arm but did not insist if she preferred distance. When they talked, he listened with full attention, asking questions that showed genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions. It was revolutionary after years of being silenced and diminished to be treated as though her words mattered. As though she mattered. Mrs. Campbell watched their courtship with approval, making sure to always leave her parlor door open when Harrison visited, but giving them space to talk privately. The other women at the boarding house, two elderly spinster sisters and a young widow, sighed over Harrison's courtly manners and told Amelia she had found a good man. Amelia was beginning to believe they might be right. It was mid-August when her world shattered. She was working in her room, letting out the waist of a dress for a pregnant ranch wife, when Mrs. Campbell knocked urgently on her door. "Amelia, dear, you need to come quickly. There is a situation." The tone of her landlady's voice sent ice through Amelia's veins. She followed Mrs. Campbell downstairs to find Sheriff Morrison in the parlor, his weathered face grim. "Miss Owens," he said without preamble, "your husband arrived on the stage this morning. He has been making inquiries in town, showing people a photograph, offering money for information. So far, no one has told him anything, but it is only a matter of time." Amelia's legs went weak. She sank into the nearest chair, her hands gripping the armrests until her knuckles went white. "What do I do? Where can I go?" "You do not have to go anywhere," said a voice from the doorway. Harrison strode in, still dusty from the range, his face set in hard lines. "This is your home. He is the one who needs to leave." "It is not that simple, son," Sheriff Morrison said quietly. "Legally, he has rights as her husband. If he insists on taking her back to New Mexico, I have limited grounds to stop him." "Then we will find grounds," Harrison said flatly. He crossed to Amelia, crouching beside her chair so their eyes were level. "Listen to me. You are not going back with him. I will not allow it. Do you understand?" "Harrison, you could be arrested for interfering. He could hurt you." The words tumbled out in rising panic. "Let him try." Harrison took her cold hands in his warm ones. "Amelia, I told you I would never hit you, but I never promised I would not defend you. That man will not lay another finger on you, not while I draw breath." Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat. "There might be another way. If Miss Owens were to remarry, her current marriage could be challenged on grounds of abandonment and cruelty. It is not foolproof, and it would take time to sort out legally, but it would give us leverage. Make the situation complicated enough that he might give up and leave." Harrison's eyes never left Amelia's face. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not because you have to, not just to solve this problem. Marry me because I love you, Amelia Owens. I have loved you since the day I saw your strength and your fear and your courage all tangled together behind that wagon. Marry me because I want to spend my life proving to you what love should be, what partnership should be. Marry me because when I imagine my future, you are in every moment of it." Amelia stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "You cannot possibly love me. We have known each other less than 3 months." "I knew the first day," Harrison said steadily. "The rest has just been falling deeper. But if you do not feel the same, we will find another way. I will not pressure you into marriage to escape one bad situation. That would make me no better than him." "That is where you are wrong," Amelia whispered, raising a shaking hand to cup his stubbled cheek. "You are nothing like him. You are kind and patient and good, and I think I started falling in love with you the moment you lowered your hand and made me that promise. So yes, I will marry you, Harrison Everett, because I love you too, and because I want the life you are offering more than I have wanted anything in years." Harrison's smile was like sunrise breaking over the desert. He leaned in slowly, telegraphing his intention, and when Amelia did not pull away, he kissed her with a tenderness that made her soul ache. It was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses of her marriage. This was soft questioning, a promise of cherishing rather than a taking. Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat pointedly. "Well then, I will go have a word with Reverend Walsh about expediting things. And I suppose I should welcome that merchant to Coolidge personally. Make sure he understands our local customs regarding the treatment of women. Man might want to reconsider his stay in our fair town." Over the next 2 days, Coolidge rallied around Amelia and Harrison with a fierce protectiveness that left Amelia breathless. The ranch owner gave Harrison 3 days off with pay. Mrs. Campbell and the other women helped Amelia alter a cream-colored dress from the general store, adding lace at the collar and cuffs. The banker's wife, whose alterations Amelia had been working on, insisted on paying for the fabric as a wedding gift. Amelia's husband, meanwhile, found himself the recipient of decidedly unwelcoming hospitality. His hotel room was the worst in the establishment, above the kitchen where it was stifling hot. His meals at the restaurant were edible but barely. No one would answer his questions. Doors closed in his face. Cowboys stared at him with flat, unfriendly eyes when he walked the streets. On the evening of the second day, Sheriff Morrison paid him a visit, along with Harrison and 3 of the largest cowboys from the Triple Bar Ranch. "I understand you are looking for your wife," Morrison said without preamble. I am here to inform you that the woman you are seeking has filed a petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty and abandonment. She has also remarried, as is her right under territorial law. Her new husband is willing to testify as to the injuries he has witnessed, scars consistent with sustained abuse. We also have statements from women in Santa Fe willing to swear to hearing sounds of violence from your home. Amelia's husband, a thin man named Richard with cold eyes and a politician's smile, drew himself up indignantly. That woman is my property, legally married. She stole money from me. I have every right. You have no rights here, Harrison cut in, his voice deadly quiet. And if you ever refer to Amelia as property again, I will forget I am a civilized man. Are you threatening me? I am educating you, Harrison said flatly. Amelia is under my protection now. If you approach her, if you speak to her, if you so much as look at her wrong, I will respond accordingly. And out here in the territory, accidents happen. Men disappear in the desert all the time. Sometimes they are never found. Richard paled, finally understanding the danger he was in. These were not Santa Fe merchants and politicians who could be swayed by money and reputation. These were hard men who lived by a different code, one that valued action over words and protected their own with unflinching loyalty. The stage leaves tomorrow morning, Sheriff Morrison said mildly. I strongly suggest you be on it. If you choose to stay, I cannot guarantee your safety. Cowboys can be unpredictable when they have been drinking, and you seem to have made yourself unpopular. Terrible shame if something happened to a visitor in my town, but these things do occur. Richard left on the morning stage, his tail between his legs, muttering threats that no one took seriously. By that afternoon, the whole town knew Amelia was finally, truly free. The wedding took place 2 days later in the small adobe church, with what seemed like the entire population of Coolidge in attendance. Amelia wore her altered cream dress with wildflowers in her hair, and Harrison wore his best suit, his hair slicked back and his boots shined. When Reverend Walsh asked if anyone objected, several cowboys audibly cracked their knuckles, and the congregation laughed. Harrison's vows were simple and heartfelt. I promise to honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be the man you deserve, to build a home with you where you are safe and loved. I promise that my hands will only ever touch you in gentleness, that my words will only ever build you up. This I swear, before God and all these witnesses. Amelia's vows came through tears. I promise to trust you with my heart, though it has been broken before. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty and respect. I promise to love you with all that I am, for all that you are. You showed me that goodness still exists in this world, Harrison. You gave me hope when I thought I had none left. I will spend my life being worthy of that gift. When Harrison kissed her as his wife, the church erupted in cheers and applause. Mrs. Campbell wept openly. Sheriff Morrison grinned and shook his head as if to say he had seen many things, but this took the prize. The reception was held at the ranch, the owner having offered his home and grounds for the celebration. There was more food than Amelia had seen in one place, music and dancing that lasted until the stars blanketed the sky. Harrison danced with his bride, holding her carefully, moving to the music with surprising grace for such a big man. Are you happy? He asked as they swayed to a slow waltz. Amelia looked up at him, this man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and responded with such profound kindness. I did not think I could be this happy. I did not think I deserved it. You deserve everything good this world has to offer, Harrison said fiercely. And I intend to spend my life proving it to you. That night, in the small house Harrison had been renting at the edge of town, He was true to every promise he had made. He was gentle and patient, letting Amelia set the pace, showing her what intimacy could be when rooted in love and respect rather than ownership and control. When she cried, he held her and whispered reassurances. When she reached for him with tentative passion, he responded with tender reverence. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Amelia felt a peace she had never known. This was what marriage should be. This partnership, this equality, this sense of being cherished exactly as she was. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I did not know love could feel like this." Safe and exciting all at once. Harrison pressed a kiss to her hair. "I will make sure you feel like this every day for the rest of our lives. That is my promise to you, Amelia Everett." Amelia Everett. She tested the name silently, feeling how it fit. It felt like freedom, like a new beginning. Like coming home to a place she had never been, but had always been searching for. Life settled into a rhythm over the following months. Harrison continued his work at the Triple Bar Ranch, breaking horses and managing the cattle operation with skill that made him invaluable to the owner. Amelia expanded her sewing business, her reputation for fine work spreading to neighboring towns. Women started coming from as far as Phoenix for her dresses and alterations. With Harrison's encouragement and a small loan from the bank, Amelia opened a proper shop on Main Street that spring. She hired one of the spinster sisters from the boarding house to help with simpler work, and together they transformed the small storefront into a thriving business. Harrison built her a large work table and shelves for her fabrics, refusing payment and insisting it was his pleasure to support her dreams. The divorce from Richard was finalized 6 months after the wedding, once the paperwork wound its way through territorial courts. Richard did not contest it. Apparently, he had remarried as well, some young woman from a wealthy family in Santa Fe. Amelia felt only relief and a distant pity for his new wife. Their first anniversary found them moving into a new house Harrison had been building with help from ranch hands and friends. It was modest but well made, with a large bedroom and a separate room for Amelia's sewing, plus space to expand as their family grew. Harrison had installed windows on all sides to catch the breezes, and built a deep porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "You ever regret it?" Amelia asked one evening as they rocked together on that porch, his arm around her shoulders. "Marrying someone with my history, the complications I brought into your life." Harrison turned to look at her, his gray-green eyes serious. "Not for one single moment." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Amelia. You made me believe in love, in partnership, in building something real. My only regret is that I could not find you sooner, spare you the years of pain." Amelia leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sage and Harrison himself. "If you had found me sooner, I would not have been ready. I needed to find my own strength first, to learn I could survive on my own. That way, being with you is a choice, not a necessity. That makes it mean more. You are a wise woman, Mrs. Everett. I am a lucky woman, Mr. Everett." Their first child arrived 2 years after their wedding, a squalling boy with his father's strong features and his mother's hazel eyes. They named him James, after Harrison's father. Harrison wept when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by the trust Amelia had placed in him, by the family they had created together. Amelia had been terrified during the pregnancy, afraid that childbirth would trigger memories of her previous marriage, but Harrison had been there through every moment, holding her hand through labor, whispering encouragement, being exactly the partner she needed. The midwife, Mrs. Campbell's sister from Tucson, had commented that she had never seen a husband so attentive and devoted. "This one is a keeper," she had told Amelia with a wink. "You hold on to him." "I intend to," Amelia had replied, smiling at Harrison through her exhaustion. James was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Catherine, who had Harrison's gray-green eyes and Amelia's auburn hair. And 2 years after that, another son, Thomas, who was placid where his siblings were energetic, content to observe the world with solemn dark eyes. The Everett house rang with laughter and occasional childish squabbles, with the sounds of Harrison teaching James to ride, with Amelia singing as she cooked dinner, with all 3 children clamoring for bedtime stories. It was everything Amelia had dreamed of during her dark years in Santa Fe, a family built on love and respect rather than fear and obligation. Harrison proved to be the father she had always hoped for her children. He was firm but never harsh, guiding rather than commanding, teaching by example. He showed his sons how to treat women with respect by the way he treated their mother. He showed his daughter that she was valuable and capable by encouraging her curiosity and independence. When James was 8, he asked why his mother sometimes got a distant look in her eyes, why she flinched from sudden movements even though no one in their house was ever violent. Harrison sat his son down and explained, in age-appropriate terms, that Amelia had been hurt before Harrison met her. That some people were cruel, but that did not mean everyone was. That their family was safe because they chose kindness every day in every interaction. "Your mother is the bravest person I know," Harrison told his son. "She survived terrible things and still found the courage to trust again, to love again. That takes more strength than anything else in the world. Our job, yours and mine, is to make sure she never regrets that trust. To build a life so good, so full of love, that the bad memories fade more every year." James took his father's words to heart. All the children did growing up to be kind and thoughtful, secure in the love of their parents. The years rolled on, marked by small triumphs and everyday joys. Amelia's shop thrived, becoming known throughout the territory for quality work. Harrison eventually bought into the Triple Bar Ranch as a partner, his years of loyal service and skill rewarded with a stake in the operation. They added rooms to their house as the children grew, built a barn for Harrison's expanding string of horses, planted trees that slowly transformed the desert lot into something like an oasis. Sheriff Morrison retired and moved to California to be near his daughters, but not before standing as godfather to Thomas at his christening. Mrs. Campbell passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76, and Amelia wept at her funeral, grateful for the kindness that landlady had shown a frightened woman all those years ago. The children grew up strong and healthy. James became a skilled horseman like his father, eventually taking over much of the ranch's breaking operation. Catherine, to everyone's surprise but no one's dismay, showed aptitude for numbers and began helping manage the ranch's accounts by the time she was 16. Thomas, the quiet observer, turned out to have his mother's eye for beauty and began learning photography from a traveling artist who passed through Coolidge. When James turned 21, he married a schoolteacher from Phoenix, a clever woman named Sarah who matched him in stubbornness and exceeded him in education. Harrison and Amelia hosted the wedding at the ranch, watching their firstborn take his vows with joy and a touch of bittersweet pride. "We are getting old," Amelia said to Harrison that night, watching the young couple dance. "We are getting lucky," Harrison corrected, pulling her into his arms. "Every year with you is a gift, Amelia. Every morning I wake up beside you. Every evening we sit on that porch. Every moment of this life we built together. You still know exactly what to say to make me cry," Amelia said, but she was smiling through her tears. "I have had years of practice. I intend to keep practicing until we are both so old we cannot remember where we put our teeth." Amelia laughed, the sound bright and free. Once she had forgotten how to laugh like that. Harrison had reminded her, day by patient day, year by loving year. Catherine married at 23, choosing a lawyer from Tucson who appreciated her sharp mind and independent spirit. Thomas, the artist, never married but built a successful photography studio in Phoenix and visited home often, filling the house with his quiet presence and thoughtful observations. As Harrison and Amelia moved into their 50s and then 60s, their hair graying and bodies slowing, the love between them only deepened. They had weathered every storm together, supported each other through losses, and celebrated each triumph. The ranch prospered under their combined management, becoming one of the most successful operations in central Arizona. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house with new energy and laughter. James and Sarah had 4 children, each one learning to ride almost before they could walk. Catherine and her husband had 2 daughters who showed promise of inheriting their mother's business acumen. Thomas never had children of his own but doted on his nieces and nephews, documenting their lives in hundreds of photographs that lined the walls of the ranch house. On their 30th anniversary, Harrison took Amelia back to the spot where they had first met, the place on Main Street where the overturned wagon had been. The town had grown and changed, but they could still find the location. "You remember?" Harrison asked, holding her hand. "Every moment," Amelia replied. "I was so frightened. Of the bullets, of the chaos, of everything. And then you were there, and for the first time in years I felt like maybe I would be okay." "You were always going to be okay," Harrison said softly. "You had that strength in you all along. I was just lucky enough to witness it, to be part of the life you built." "We built," Amelia corrected. "Every piece of it together." They stood there in the dusty street, 2 people who had found each other in the chaos and built something beautiful from broken pieces. Around them, Coolidge bustled with activity, the little town grown prosperous and peaceful. Their legacy was everywhere, in the shop that still bore Amelia's name even though Catherine ran it now, in the ranch that James managed, in the photographs of Thomas that graced half the homes in town. But their true legacy was simpler and more profound. It was in the promise Harrison had made 30 years ago and kept every day since. It was in the life they had built where love was given freely, never demanded, where partnership meant equality, where home meant safety. It was in 3 words that had changed everything. "I will never hit you." Those words had been more than a promise. They had been a vow, a prophecy, a foundation upon which 2 broken people had built something whole and lasting and true. As they walked home together, their steps slower than they once were but their hands still clasped, Amelia felt the same peace she had felt on her wedding night all those years ago. Harrison had promised her safety and given her love. He had promised her respect and given her partnership. He had promised her everything good and spent 30 years proving that some men kept their promises. In the desert sunset, 2 figures moved together across the land they had made their own, their shadows long and intertwined, heading home to the life they had created through courage, kindness, and unwavering love. It was a life neither had dared dream of in those early, frightened days. But dreams, Harrison had taught Amelia, were worth having, and some dreams, against all odds, actually came true. Years continued to pass in gentle progression. Harrison and Amelia eventually retired from active ranch work, though Harrison could never quite stay away from the horses. He would spend mornings in the barn, his weathered hands still steady as he worked with the young colts, teaching them trust the same way he had once taught Amelia. She would find him there, talking to the animals in his low, steady voice. And remember the man who had lowered his hand so carefully all those years ago. In their 70s, they were fixtures on their porch every evening, watching the grandchildren play in the yard, dispensing wisdom and candy in equal measure. The town revered them as pioneers, part of the generation that had built Coolidge from a dusty settlement into a thriving community. One evening, when Harrison was 78 and Amelia 75, they sat together as the sun painted the sky in familiar brilliance. Harrison's health had been failing slowly, his heart giving out after a lifetime of hard work. They both knew his time was growing short. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Amelia asked softly. "That first day." "I remember every word I have ever spoken to you," Harrison replied, his voice weaker but no less warm. "But I remember those words especially. They were the truest thing I ever said." "You kept your promise," Amelia said, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "Every single day for 43 years. You kept your promise." "Loving you was the easiest promise I ever made to keep," Harrison said, lifting her hand to his lips in the gesture that had been his signature throughout their marriage. "Amelia Everett, you are the great joy and privilege of my life. If I had it to do over, I would not change a single moment." "Neither would I," Amelia whispered. "Not one." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, his head leaning against hers, their fingers interlaced. Two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and built something rare and precious. Harrison passed peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, Amelia beside him, their hands still clasped. The town mourned the loss of a good man, but celebrated a life well lived and a love story that had inspired an entire community. Amelia lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and engaged with the world. She never remarried, telling anyone who asked that she had already had the great love of her life and needed no other. She spent her final years writing down their story, wanting the grandchildren and great-grandchildren to know how their family began. How a frightened woman and a kind cowboy had built something extraordinary from a moment of gentleness in a violent world. She passed quietly one spring morning, sitting on her beloved porch with a photograph of Harrison in her lap. The family found her there, a soft smile on her face, finally at peace. They buried her beside Harrison in the small cemetery outside Coolidge, under a cottonwood tree that provided shade in the harsh Arizona sun. The headstone reads simply, "Harrison and Amelia Everett, together in love, together in eternity." Their story became part of Coolidge's history, passed down through generations. The great-great-grandchildren would hear about the cowboy who had made a promise and kept it, about the woman who had found courage to love again, about the family they built through kindness and commitment. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert wind whispered through the cottonwoods, people swore they could see two figures on the old Everett porch, sitting together as the sun set, their silhouettes intertwined, watching over the legacy they had created. A legacy not of wealth or fame, but of love freely given and gently kept. A legacy that proved even in the harsh landscape of the Wild West, even in the face of cruelty and pain, goodness could prevail. Love could heal. And promises made in earnest could last beyond a lifetime, echoing through generations as proof that some bonds, forged in courage and maintained in tenderness, truly were eternal.